After a while, it was nearly sundown, and I went home with many others to eat, while some others stayed to watch the soldiers on the hill. I hadn't eaten all day because the trouble started just when I was beginning to eat my first meal. After I showed my mother my first scalp, I stayed with the women a while, and they were all singing and making the tremolo. We could not see much out the battle for the big dust, but we knew there would be no soldiers left. There were many other boys about my age and younger up there with their mothers and sisters, and they asked me to go over to the battle with them. So we got on our ponies and started. While we were riding downhill toward the river, we saw gray horses with empty saddles stampeding toward the water. We rode over across the greasy grass to the mouth of a gulch that led up through the bluffs where the fighting was. Before we got there, the whites were all down, and most of them were dead, but some of them were still alive and kicking. Many other little boys had come up by this time, and we rode around shooting arrows into the whites. There was one who was squirming around with arrows sticking in him, and I started to take his coat, but a man pushed me away and he took the coat for himself. Then I saw something bright hanging on this soldier's belt, and I pulled it out. It was round and bright and yellow and very beautiful, and I put it onto my necklace. At first it ticked inside, and then did not anymore. Elle wore it around my neck for a long time before Elle found out what it was and how to make it tick again. Then the women all came over and we went to the top of the hill. Gray horses were lying dead there, and some of them were on top of dead whites, and dead whites were on top of them. There were not many of our own dead there, because they had been picked up already, but many of our men were killed and wounded. They shot each other in the dust, and I did not see Custer, and I think nobody knew which one he was. There was a soldier who was raising his arms and groaning. I shot an arrow into his forehead, and his arms and legs quivered. I saw some Lakotas holding another Lakota up. Elle went over there, and it was Chase in the Morning's brother, who was called Black White. He had been shot through the right shoulder downward, and the bullet stopped in his left hip because he was hanging on the side of his horse when he was hit. They were trying to give him some medicine. He was my cousin, and his father and my father were so angry over this that they went and butchered a Wasichu and cut him open. The Wasichu was fat, and his meat looked good to eat, but we did not eat any. There was a little boy, younger than I was, who asked me to scalp a soldier for him. I did, and he ran to show the scalp to his mother. While we were there, most of the warriors chased the other soldiers back to the hill where they had their pack mules. After a while, I got tired looking around. I could smell nothing but blood, and I got sick of it, so I went back home with some others. I was not sorry at all. I was a happy boy. Those whites had come to kill our mothers and fathers and us, and it was our country. When I was in the brush up there by the Hunkpapas, the first soldiers were shooting. I knew this would happen. I thought that my people were relatives to the thunder beings of my vision, and that the soldiers were very foolish to do this. Everybody was up all night in the village. Next morning, another war party went up to the hill where the other soldiers were, and the men who had been watching there all night came home. My mother and I went along. She rode a mare with a little colt tied beside her, and it trotted along with its mother. We could see the horses and pack mules up there, but the soldiers were dug in. Beneath the hill, right on the west side of the greasy grass, were some blueberry bushes, and there was a big boy by the name of Round Fool who was running around the bushes. He said, "There is a white in that bush." And there was. He had hidden there when the other soldiers ran to the hilltop, and he had been there all night. We boys began shooting at him with arrows, and it was like chasing a rabbit. He would crawl from one side to the other while we were running around the bush, shooting at him with our bows. Once he yelled, "Ow!" After a while, we set fire to the grass around the bushes, and he came out running. Some of our warriors killed him. Once we went up the back of the hill to where some of our men were and looked over, we could not see the whites who were lying in their dug-ins, but we saw the horses and pack mules, and many of them were dead. When we came down and crossed the river again, some soldiers shot at us and hit the water. Mother and I galloped back to the camp, and it was about sundown. By then, our scouts had reported that more soldiers were coming upstream, so we all broke camp. Before dark, we were ready, and we started up the greasy grass, heading for Woodlouse Creek in the Bighorn Mountains. We fled all night, following the greasy grass. My 2 younger brothers and I rode in a pony drag, and my mother put some young pups in with us. They were always trying to crawl out, and I was always putting them back in, so I didn't sleep much. By morning, we reached a little dry creek and made camp and had a big feast. The meat had spots of fat in it, and I wish I had some of it right now. When it was full day, we started again and came to Woodlouse Creek at the foot of the mountains and camped there. Black elk,